Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a SOCA researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy.
Greetings from California. I'm Denise Nelson Nash. And there's one thing that I want you, Scott, to know and all your listeners. I used to have this slab of granite that was on my desk when I was with the city of Pasadena. And it said, "It's not etched in stone." So what I want you and your listeners to walk away with is understanding that from my perspective, how we live, how we lead, how we think, or how we do things is not etched in stone. And we always have agency to tinker, adapt, and reshape it.
Wow. What a beautiful way to start this conversation, Denise. Thank you so much. And lots of food for thought right from the beginning. I love that. I think it's really important for us to continuously learn, to tinker, and really reflect on where we're at right now. And that actually brings us to why we're here together to reflect on your journey as an educator and the many, many things that you've done, but also the many, many lives that you have impacted through that career. And I am so glad that we were able to meet in person. We had a great opportunity to connect in Cambridge at Harvard University, where you gave a fantastic book talk. And we're going to get into that as well. I kind of beat you to it in terms of, planting that seed. But there's so much, that comes from the work in your book that, is a direct reflection of your life and your work. So I'm just happy that we can unpack that together, and wanted to pass it over to you and ask you to share some of the milestones of your journey as an educator. And I'm very eager to learn more.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Scott. And likewise, it was such a pleasure to have you moderating or facilitating our conversation about our book, which, I'm going to mention many times, so I will get to that.
Please.
I'll start a little bit about my story. So I was born in California. So I'm one of those, I was born at California Hospital, downtown Los Angeles. I don't think you can get more Californian than that. But I've spent a lifetime sort of proving that home is a moving target, because I've lived on the East Coast, I've lived in the Midwest, I've lived internationally in Venezuela, and I've now set foot in over 40 countries, and every single one of them taught me the same lesson. And that's that the real work of discovering culture is finding your bridge to it. So I've always considered myself to be a bridge builder, or at least a person who looks for the bridge. And that belief has carried me through all of the different organizations that I've been involved with, which includes the city of Pasadena, Caltech, and now my alma mater, Scripps College, where I serve as vice president and secretary of the Board of Trustees. A lot of people say, "Well, what does that mean? What do you do?" It's basically governance. So what does that mean? Well, it's a sort of fancy way, that title of saying that I partner with the president and the other vice presidents, which we call the senior team, to advance the mission of the college, for us to be bold and ambitious and deliver on the promise of the mission. And usually we do all of that at the same time. So I have 3 degrees, a BA from Scripps, which taught me how to think critically, analyze robustly, and remain open to opportunities. Then I have an MFA in dance from the University of Michigan, which taught me how to improvise and basically make things up and make them look really good. And then I have an EDD in leadership and education from NYU that taught me how to make those things work. And then somewhere in the middle, I became what I call a tinkerer, someone who's less interested in the perfect plan, because there is no perfect, than a good idea that you can actually build on and build upon. And then along the way, I co-wrote the Trinity of Leadership, Learners, Thinkers, and Tinkerers, with 5 brilliant colleagues. And that's because we always believe that leadership isn't one skill, it's a conversation between them all. And I'm also co-host of a podcast myself, Life in Higher Ed. And so today I'm excited to sit on the other side of the microphone for a change with you, Scott. And honestly, this feels like, one of those field trips that kids get to take, but I get to take it. So I'm pretty excited.
Well, I'm very excited to have you, and I'm so impressed with all that you've shared about the various different places that you've lived in. I have like so many questions about just what home means to you. You said home is a moving target, and I find that it also entails the sense of like kind of recreating those like homely feelings through the people around you, right? The connections with people in our immediate area, but then it extends to all those other places and the cultural side of it, building bridges. I feel like we're kindred spirits in the sense that I also really want to build bridges between different communities and between people. And I think that it's so needed in the times that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And I love how you were able to kind of go through each of your degrees and really pull out in like such a succinct way the deeper lesson that you were able to learn. I'm sure there's so much more, but you just did it so succinctly. I find that there's a lot there that can also tie into this concept of being a global citizen. But before we get into all of that, and also of course your book, The Trinity of Leadership, I wanted to focus in on the formative years that you had. You said that you had moved around to different places. Did you find that like in like growing up, like your childhood years, was that also a feature of it? Or like how did learning look like growing up for you in your
Mm-hmm.
family or in the immediate schools?
Mm-hmm. So I didn't move around growing up. So all of that I
Mm,
talked about happened later in life. So after
I
high
see.
school. Okay. But before high school, I was rooted in Southern California, and I had an amazing set of parents, and they had an interesting story as well. My parents were both from the South, one from Mississippi and one from Virginia. And they grew up in sort of post Jim Crow South. Really wasn't even post; it was still Jim Crow, and it formed who they were and how they thought. But the one thing they instilled in my brother and myself was we could do absolutely anything. That there were no boundaries, there were no barriers. The only boundaries and barriers we had were the ones we put up for ourselves. And so, growing up, I had parents and I had family who really pushed me to think boldly and to do things that maybe were beyond what society said that I could or should do. And so gender was never an issue. My positionality was never an issue, and race and ethnicity was never an issue in our household. So I am very, very thankful for having a set of parents and a community that supported me in that way. So then it was later, after I graduated from high school, went to Scripps, as I mentioned, then dashed off to the University of Michigan and lived in the Midwest. Boy, that's a different culture altogether. And then taught at Illinois Wesleyan University. Then I went to New York, but it was Venezuela. It was the 3 years that I spent there that really taught me these lessons. So in the book, you'll read about, because I can't help but just keep coming back to the book. But in the book, you'll read a story that I have about similar is not the same. So, and this ties into this whole concept. And I love your podcast, Foundation of Global Citizenship, because as you and I both know, it's not a passport stamp, right? Global citizen, it's like a posture. It's a way of being. It's how you choose to walk into any room, any culture, any conversation and ask, what can I learn? Right? Before you start talking about what can I teach, how can I lead, all of that, it's like, what can I learn? And the important lesson I learned when I was in Venezuela was that, yeah, people look the same. Okay, the language was different. Cultures seemed to be about the same on the surface, but boy, similar was not the same. And it was just the fact that there was a communal aspect, there was the importance of family, there was this support system that was in place. The individualistic approaches that we take in the US very often, we want to go off and live independently as soon as we graduate from take it college or grad school. That's success, right? Being out on your own. There, it was staying within the family and staying connected with each other. And that taught me such an important lesson about the value of your quote unquote tribe, the people around you who are invested in your success. And that's what I have seen as I've traveled globally, is that I see that repeated over and over again in so many cultures. And while on the surface, it may look similar, it's a family structure, but it's not the same. It's got deeper roots and it's more expansive and it looks differently when you sort of open the door and really peer in and take a step forward and immerse yourself in it.
Mm, wow. You know, I love everything that you just shared. And I really resonate with your experience going to Venezuela, because I too spent many a year in a South American country, that being Brazil. Before I get into that, I wanted to say, going to your parents and, this valuable lesson that they taught you to be bold, right? To
Mhm.
to really believe in yourself, be
Yes.
ambitious, and just do whatever it is that you set your mind to. I doubt that they could have imagined, right, so specifically that you would go on to like live in a place like Venezuela, for example, right, or go on like to be, like a vice president at like a really really amazing, prestigious university like Scripps College. But I think, in a way, like not going into the details of it, it's the spirit of it that was so important, right? This
Mhm.
permission to really allow you to blaze your own path forward, and to enjoy that process. Of course, it must have been very challenging, moments where maybe you might have had self-doubt or thinking, how is this going to pan out for me? But I think, being able to identify really specific experiences like the one that you shared about going to another country to start really expanding your view of the world, and hence your view of yourself too. Because I think this really this phrase that you put, that it's similar is not the same.
Mhm.
I
Right.
don't think you can just learn that from reading it on a piece of paper. I
Mm-mm.
think in this case it was something that you really had to live. And I'm sure that the experience that you had in Venezuela was very very powerful. Um and and I'm curious, like, from Venezuela, what brought you back to the U.S.? When was the moment where you were like, okay, I need to kind of go and, I don't know, like what was the thought process there? Because it sounds like, it was really an exciting moment and you learned a lot. But then did there come a time where you just felt like either, your time, like, when did you know your time was up there, or
Mhm.
what brought you back, I guess is
Right.
my
Yeah.
question.
So I want to take a few steps back and just say a little bit more um about what you highlighted. And that was
Okay.
that my parents instilled in me agency, to give myself
Mm.
agency over my own sort of destiny and where I would go next. And that is like such a valuable thing that we can give to those around us, whether it is a child, a cousin, a niece, a nephew, a young person that we meet. It is just so very important, because when you feel trapped that things are being done to you and around you and you don't have that opportunity, it can really mess with your self-esteem, with your confidence, right? So I've never felt overly confident, but I've always felt confident that I had a circle of trust, and I have built many circles of trust over the years. And I have had always those circles that have been there to support me and me to support them. So that's just something I just kind of want to punctuate and highlight. And then the other thing is because you have also lived in another culture that was not your own, it takes courage and confidence to do that. Because when you step into another place where it is similar but not the same, where there's another language spoken, or how people operate, those nuances of culture that you can't just you can't even describe them. You have to live them, right? And so to be able to have the privilege to do that, and it's that moment, or at least for me, it was that moment when I stopped translating in my head and I was actually speaking Spanish fluently, And it was that moment when I stopped being a visitor and I became a resident of where I was. That was like an incredible moment. And yes, I'm going to get to your question too, but that was such an incredible moment. And I still remember it. I was talking to one of my Venezuelan sisters. Her name was Anita. In case she listens to this, you can know that she had this influence or impact on me. We were
Yeah,
sitting down
shout out
having
to
a
Anita.
coffee. Yeah, shout out to Anita, right? I don't know. We were having coffee or something. And so in Spanish, they will call you the opposite. So I'm a slim person. So they call me gorda, which, means fat, but I'm not. But it's term of affection. Okay. It's not meant to offend anyone. And I remember we were just having coffee and she goes, gorda. And I said, what? And she said, you're speaking Spanish. And I was like, I am. She goes, yes, you're not translating your head. We're having a conversation. And in that moment, the culture opened up to me because then I was able to really see and understand what was going on around me. We take that for granted in our own country because this is where we grew up. This is the language we speak. This is the culture we know. So we just naturally notice certain things and we're not doing it consciously. But that was the moment that I knew that I was no longer a visitor, that I had become a resident.
And just to add on
Yeah.
to that, because this
Uh-huh.
is a moment rich with meaning and significance. It was also a moment where you realized, like, when the lights came on, right? Things were suddenly
Mhm.
making sense, and you were processing the language in this very
Yes.
fluent way.
Mhm.
You knew that you earned it, right? Because
Mhm.
it's such a battle to learn a new language. It comes with, you said it takes courage to live in another country, and I think it takes courage to learn a new language in that country.
Yes.
A lot of people who are expats who decide not to, or their environments make it easy for them to continue
Mhm.
using their main language, right? Maybe it's just English, but it's a lesson in humility, I find, because there's so many things that you just don't know, and so many actions that you take within that cultural setting that you won't know either, or you won't understand, and at first it feels very, I don't know, it just at times feels humiliating too. So I
Mhm.
feel like it keeps your ego in check. But then when you get to a point where you just kind of realize that's par for the course, and then you have these support networks of friends who are encouraging, and let's be honest, South Americans are the most encouraging when it comes to you trying to learn their language. They
Mhm.
really want to support you. I know for myself, when I was learning Spanish in Peru, um, it felt like, almost like my brain, like physically, I would just have like these headaches because I was trying so hard to learn the language.
Mhm.
Sometimes my jaw would hurt from like trying to pronounce the la R. Like I
Mhm.
couldn't roll my R's that well. It was very
Yeah.
difficult. I
Mhm.
would like do these tongue twisters all the time. But yeah, one day, and it was not even a special day. It was just like a normal day. I didn't have someone point it out, but it just kind of flowed when I was like,
Uh-huh.
having breakfast. And then I remember that moment as well, being like, wow, like, why does it feel easier now? Like, it just didn't make sense in my head now. It was a
Yeah.
reverse
Mhm.
confusion point.
Right.
But maybe could you speak more to, like, from that moment on, like, how were you able to, like, it almost sounds like a rebirth. Like, you became Venezuelan. How did that shift the way you engaged with others and your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it shifted a lot. So that's really interesting. I mean, I remember there was this one word, and I was like, I am going to get this word one way or another. I'm going to figure out how to say it. It was estacionamiento. And it was like, I could not say that word. And I was like, going to say that word. And the first time I said, I mean, literally, it was like fireworks went off. I was so excited. So, I mean, there are those, that's another one of those little moments. But yes, it's like being a toddler again and you fall down, but you can't get embarrassed because, toddlers, they just get up and keep going. Right. So I had to pull on, from my, the earlier years to just say, I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to have fun with it and people will correct me. But hopefully that they will be generous and in seeing that I am trying. And that was consistently my experience. People would give me gentle corrections, sometimes direct corrections. Sometimes I would say things that really didn't work in the setting, but I was excused. um, but it taught me so much about the generosity of spirit of people. And that goes back to that sort of global citizenship piece about it being a posture, or sort of a way of living, not just a stamp in your passport, not just sort of a collector of experiences or like tourist experiences in different places. And so it just shifted something in me. And I think there's one word that has always been part of my vocabulary since that time, and that is gratitude. And gratitude comes in so many different forms for me. I mean, I was grateful to those who had the patience and took the time with me. I was grateful that I had the opportunity to be curious in a place that I did not grow up, and that I was able to explore that curiosity and I was met halfway. And I was grateful just for every day that I was able to jump on a camioneta, go to work, meet some friends afterwards at, a cafe or someplace, or go to someone's home for dinner at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I mean, it was always really late and meals went on forever. I mean, I was just so grateful for that experience. I was in my early 20s. And so that's not necessarily the optimal time to learn another language. I mean, I had taken Spanish classes when I was in school, but I took French more recently than Spanish. But it was just like, I was game. I was game, and people were so generous, and I was just so thrilled to have that opportunity. So gratitude was the word. But I still want to
Mm,
get back to your original question, because I've kind of
of
taken you
course.
around the world with me, literally. You said, why did I leave? Because it was an amazing experience. And I'll tell you, I wouldn't have left, probably, so soon if the bottom hadn't fallen out of the economy. So I was being paid in bolívares. It just came down to purely a financial situation. Venezuela has always had a little bit of a tenuous government situation, but it didn't really affect me until it affected me financially. So I was being paid in bolívares. The bottom fell out. My bolívares weren't worth nearly as much as before. I wasn't able to sustain the quality of living that I had there. I wasn't able to travel as much because I did a lot of traveling when I was living in Venezuela, because it's so easy to jump off and go. It sounds like it sounds luxurious. I was at a different island almost every weekend. But if you look at the position of Venezuela, it's very easy to go to a different island every weekend because the Caribbean's right there. Um, but it was for financial reasons that I came back. Mhm.
I see. Wow. I find that any kind of big move, whether it's to go to another country or to leave, has to be, big enough to kind of like shake up your way of life there. And I'm sure like it was not a easy decision, even with that bottom coming off, right?
Mhm.
And maybe a feeling of like loss, right? Of like what used to have been, right, in terms of the travel, or the sense of like maybe your expectations of wanting to stay there longer, or of course like the friendships that you had there. I know for myself, like my reasonings for leaving Brazil felt very dramatic, and maybe you
Mhm.
felt this way too.
Mhm.
I mean, for me, it was in the sense of like a pandemic happening,
Mhm.
uh, and the end of a relationship that was also very, very powerful, and just the sense that like I guess my chapter had run its course, and this was
Mhm.
a very obvious way of the universe to tell me you need to move on. You need to find
Mhm.
a new place to grow. And I find that with a lot of this, especially talk of being a global citizen, how to navigate these different cultural contexts that we find ourselves in, it comes down to getting out of one's comfort zone. And I think you put this really beautifully when you talked about it being a posture, a way of being, and you asked this very simple question. It's like, what can I learn?
Mhm.
So I'm surprised that many people that I come across don't ask themselves this question, right? There's always this
Mhm.
sense of autopilot. I just need
Yeah.
to do this, X, Y, Z, move on, right?
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
as you know, when you're in a culture that's completely different from your own, there's no way to go into autopilot. Everything is stimulating you. Everything's catching your attention, and you're just trying to make sense of it. And it's such an intense way of learning and living. So then to suddenly now be jolted out of that and to say, okay, I
Yeah.
need to go back to California.
Hmm.
For me, back to the parents' house, it was this odd feeling of like, I'm happy to be with my family. And you were speaking about the tight family, bonds that Venezuelans have.
Hmm.
Brazilians are the same way. It felt really good to be back home, and I had so much gratitude, and I have so much gratitude for my parents. But I also kind of felt like, I don't want to say failure because that's a really harsh word, but I felt like this is not how I had intended it playing out. And so, okay, my question to you, since you've had so many experiences, I know we were really focusing on this one powerful one with Venezuela, and to teach there. But like, how is it when you go between like you bookend one chapter and then you
Hmm.
push into the next one? I'm very interested to hear from
Yeah.
you. Like, what is it? I know the word courage is used a lot, but like,
Hmm.
could you kind of add some more nuance to that? Like, what was it
Yeah.
like for you to make that transition?
Hmm. I'm wondering when I tell you this, if this is going to resonate with you. When I came back, I felt out of place. I didn't feel like I knew I was home, but I didn't feel quite in sync with home. And I would go places and people would ask me, "Where are you from?" And I'd say, "Where am I from? I'm I'm from, Inglewood or, wherever I was living at the time because I grew up in Inglewood." And they go, "No, no, no. Where are you from? Where were you born?" And I was like, "California." And they're like, "Really?" So there was something about me that clearly had changed. I had really absorbed so much of the culture and the experiences that I had in Venezuela that there was something that said that I wasn't totally US anymore to those who met me initially. And I will say that the first week or so, I didn't want to go out. I just stayed in my parents' home. I didn't feel comfortable just navigating spaces at first. I needed a transition period, and it was a strange feeling to need that, to not feel comfortable in my own country. And I noticed things that I hadn't noticed before. Yeah, I got to go back one more time because I have to tell you one other story. So when I was in Venezuela, okay, so you see me. There were only two American TV shows that they got, and that was Sanford and Son and Dynasty. So they see me, I show up. Most people would say, "Oh, are you Colombian?" And I go, "No, I'm not Colombiana. No." And then they would say, "Well, where are you from?" And I'd say the US, and they'd look and they were just puzzled because those were the two reference points they had. And I didn't fit Sanford and Son and I didn't fit Dynasty. So it was really an odd situation. So now I come back and again, I'm feeling the same way in my own country. Like people are questioning, like, "Where are you from?" Like I don't fit. I'm not fitting some mold that people are expecting me to fit in. So it was just really an interesting juxtaposition about my life to have gone somewhere, felt like the outsider, become immersed as an insider, come home and feel like the outsider. And so it took a little while for me to integrate back in because I started driving around. I was gone for 3 years, so I should tell you that too. I did come back, I think it was only once. It could have been twice to visit. So I really hadn't been back in the States. I had been traveling all over. And so when I came back, so many things had changed. You think about if you live in an area and there's stores and things around you, restaurants, if you were gone for 3 years and you come back, probably a good portion of those are no longer there and something else is there in its place. Or the people that you would see on a regular basis maybe have moved on. And so the community looked different. So it was just like noticing how different things were. I had to find myself again within my own community so that I could then start anew. And I did feel I mean, I was saddened by the fact that I had to leave, but it really came down to an economic decision that I had to make because I just couldn't stay financially. If it hadn't happened that way, who knows how long I would have been there. And I too had one of those relationship stories, which we won't talk about. But it it had happened a little time before that. But all that to say that, the transition wasn't easy, but what it taught me was to also have greater awareness. I mean, I had honed that awareness because I had shown up curious when I got to Venezuela, and I learned to listen a little bit longer than kind of feels natural and to look for sort of the bridges as I talked about instead of borders. I had to do the same thing when I came back home. I had to repeat that, but I was doing it in quote unquote my own home. And that's what struck me as, odd or different, but it really helped me understand better who I am, what I value, and my sense of gratitude.
Wow, what a beautiful answer. And you were right. It resonated a lot, a whole lot with me. That feeling of being an outsider in my own hometown. And yeah, this feeling of like dislocation of trying to make sense of, like am I picking up on the right cues, or the way that I'm speaking, has that changed? The way that I look, I think I've changed that much from the way I look. But it is interesting to think about how we show up differently. And I like that you made it clear in the way that you use the word like awareness, the way that we listen, and the way that we kind of engage others. Like it might seem subtle, but it makes profound impacts on the people around us. And I have like some funny story too about this. The first time I ever went abroad was to Buenos Aires in Argentina. It was after my first year of studying Spanish at my university. So my Spanish was it was not that great, okay. But I was also kind of thinking, oh, I'll get a handle of this. It'll be no big deal. So I go to Buenos Aires, and then I am just shocked at how lost I feel, and my Spanish did not help prepare me to speak in any proficient way with the porteños over there, and then they also were just their dialect is very, very strong. They don't speak Espanol, and they don't speak
Mhm.
Castellano. They speak Castellano. They have that flair to it, and so the 7 weeks I was there, I just felt like so lost, and from just like a speaking wise, like trying to speak Spanish, and I was yearning to speak English, but no one was speaking English to me, and it felt very difficult. Now fast forward, I come back, and as soon as I get back, my family decides to go on a trip to Ashland, Oregon, and there's a Shakespearean festival there. So I arrive thinking, oh, I'm back home, I can speak English, I know English. I might not know Spanish well, but I know English. We go to this Shakespearean festival, and I don't know what play we saw, but I just remember feeling this sense of dread because I couldn't understand what they were saying in this old English. So it was just funny because I just felt dislocated like in rapid succession, and I was like, man, I can't speak Spanish, I can't even speak English, I don't know what's going on. But again, humbling, and it's just kind of part of it. I think now I can look back and just laugh at that, because I think maybe I was a little bit too wrapped up in my own head.
Mhm.
But yeah, the insider and outsider, I find this to be a very common theme when it comes to those who have lived abroad. Some are, I don't know if the word is like they're tolerant of it, or they're more embracing of it than
Mhm.
others,
Mhm.
right? Because being an outsider, I mean, it can feel very isolating, and
Right.
that's not a good feeling.
Mhm.
Um, but maybe could you speak to I love again the way you kind of talked about it as an awareness, this shift in how you engage with others. So from that experience, do you see that this awareness has helped you in your professional experiences, and what the next job was? Did people take notice of this change in you and see it as a strength, as an asset in helping you to be a better educator?
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna do it to you again. I want to go back. I'm going to answer your
Okay.
question, but your story about Ashland, Oregon,
Hmm.
and the language issue. So this also reminds me when people hear global citizen, they think that you have to travel. And this is what, like, sometimes you don't have to really leave your zip code or your country to 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 experience something where you might feel out of place, not quite in touch, maybe othered. And so this is where it's not so much about how wide you're willing to open a door. It's about how far you've traveled to get to it. And so what I mean by that is that everyone or many people think that you have to leave a country in order to have these kinds of experiences. You can have them right here at home. And so global citizenry doesn't necessarily require you to live in another country. It has to be, you have to be open and willing to learn. Now I'm going to bring the awareness piece into it, and that awareness also of what is happening around you and how you are navigating situations. And I've never tried to be an expert on the world, because who can be? I'm just trying to stay a student of it. And so by always remaining a student, in other words, being willing to learn, being open to learn, that's what I've brought into my professional life. And that's where awareness comes in. As I said, it's like listening that little bit longer than feels natural. Like, I always like to talk about quieting your mind when you're having a conversation, or when you're in a conversation, or you're in a situation. So often we're not listening. We are formulating our answers. We're thinking about what we're going to say next. So to truly listen, it's got to feel a little bit longer, as I was saying, than natural, because naturally it's like I'm listening, but I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, or how I'm going to respond to you. And I think that's what I brought back with me, was that awareness of curiosity isn't a point in time. It can be a continuum, and you have to let that curiosity play out, and it takes time, and you have to give it that time. And so when I sat in different situations, it was noted that Denise was processing or thinking. I would ask questions instead of giving answers. And that's something I really love doing, because I am curious, but it's also a way to check if you're really listening. Because if you're asking questions, if you're doing reflective listening, and you bring that to the table, I think it just improves not only your leadership, but everything that you bring to a collective situation. Because then others feel valued, and they are valued in your mind and in theirs, um, about what they have to offer and what they have to say. So that awareness piece, I think, has also become a cornerstone, along with gratitude, of what I brought back with me and what I intentionally practice and try to practice in every situation on a daily basis.
Wow. Yeah. And I think also that progression from like awareness to gratitude, and also to listening, right? Really
Uh-huh.
valuing, giving the space to others, valuing what they say, and not putting in all these kind of judgments that tend to pile up in our heads of how are we then to respond. I find when too much of the voices in our own head come into play, it's really
Uh-huh.
just kind of our ego trying to, filter through quickly and then come up with something in return. But again, we're not giving the other person the really the respect that they deserve of
Right.
like, are you able to fully flesh out your thoughts? And I think when it comes to how we listen to others, it does feel like a gift, right? That we're giving others, because oftentimes in society, we are just rushed into the next thing, and we're not encouraged to take that extra moment to really process things when that's all we really want. I find. So I think that's something that I know for myself as well. I try to be very mindful of and apply, but it is a practice. It's something that you have to continuously work at, and catch yourself when, again, we're overthinking things, or we're not centered, we're not present. And yeah. And then I also wanted to comment about what you brought up earlier, because I do think that, again, being a global citizen, like, we don't have to travel all over the place, and those experiences can be felt right in our immediate areas, right in our own town. So that's very empowering, I think, for people to really hear that and understand that it's not about the distances that we travel. But I do think that even when there's an opportunity in front of us, like to go to that Shakespearean festival, or to try out that one salsa dance with a friend, whatever it might be. But like, what does it take to bridge that gap? I think is an important question. Like, how will this change me for the better, or how will this put me in a difficult or awkward situation, or how will this allow me to connect with someone and create a beautiful new friendship? I mean, the possibilities are infinite, right? But oftentimes we get so paralyzed with that, or we're on autopilot, that we don't give ourselves that opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is why listening is so important. And I would also say that listening, or being able to truly listen, is a gift for ourselves as well as what we give to others. Because when you take that pause from formulating, from thinking about what's coming next, you are receiving something that may enrich your life that you might have missed otherwise. You might be missing an experience that you can follow up on. And so instead of trying to figure out how to answer, which is based on a limited set of information and your own experiences, listening can open up a world of possibilities to you. And that's why I think listening is so very important.
Wow. Yes, I'm 100% in agreement with you. And, part of listening is to really take in the stories of others. And I want to use this as a transition to speak about the impact of storytelling. And you had commented earlier that you edited and co-authored this book that is, in essence, a collection of stories of incredible educators from different backgrounds, different parts of the world. And wanted to give you some time to share a little bit more about what that process was like, and if you would like to share any particular examples from that collection of stories.
Yeah. So where am I? I should have a book in front of me so I could read something, but I don't. So, but I will tell you something. So first, I want to go back to my "It's Not Etched in Stone" piece of granite that I had on my desk. That was a way that I told anybody who walked into my office, or signaled, I should say, to anyone who walked into my office, that we don't have to do, think, or say things the way we've always done them. And so I have always loved adjusting, experimenting, reshaping, reimagining, assembling, and disassembling ideas, notions, systems, and that agency that I talked about that my parents gave me, it was the agency to innovate, to adapt and make an impact. And the book comes out of that spirit of wanting to have an impact, wanting to share, and what better way than storytelling? I mean, it's the oldest form of communication. I think we talked about this, or I said something about this when we were together in Cambridge, is that before there were books, before there was everything that we have today, there were fires, and people sat around fires and they told stories. And that's the way culture was communicated. That's the way shared responsibilities were communicated. That was the way it was decided what a community was going to do. So storytelling was sort of the natural vehicle for our book. So Trish Beck and I are co-authors of the book. And then we invited 4 very close friends, and we all met in our doctoral program. We were not all part of the same cohort, but we have the same shared experience. And what we have in common is that we're all individuals who want to share so that others can learn from experiences. So we all learned from someone else's experiences, and those were done through stories. I mean, if you think about, let's just think about a meeting. If you go into a meeting and somebody is sharing a PowerPoint, what do they do with that PowerPoint? They tell a story around it. So it's always about storytelling. And so we wanted to have something that could be lasting so that any individual who was dealing with a certain situation could pick up our book and find maybe some inspiration or some validation or something, some nugget that would help them. So it's divided into 3 pillars: learners, thinkers, and tinkerers. And yes, we are all have part of those 3, but when you think about it, learning is acquiring new information. A lot of what we've been talking about, right? About being curious, about listening, to open yourself up to receiving, right? Then once you've learned something, then kind of the thinker part takes hold. You know, you think about thinking. So there's so many different ways of thinking, right? You can process information in so many different ways. So it is a distinct pillar when you think about all the different ways of thinking. And then tinkerer, that's the 3rd pillar, is exactly what I've just been talking about in terms of reimagining, assembling, disassembling thoughts. That's what we do on a daily basis, especially creative people. They're always saying, look at this thing we have, and what are different angles we can see in it? What are ways we can take it apart and put it back together? And so our stories from the 6 of us, hopefully, there's one in there for everyone in every situation. I would kind of guess there would be, because there's a lot of stories in there. But it's about our journeys and what we've experienced along the way. We didn't always get it right, and so not all the stories don't have golden endings. There's not like this, if you do this, this will occur. It's like, this is what we experienced. This is how we navigated it. And it has an endpoint, but the endpoint, like one of my stories that I tell in the Tinkerer, is a story about failure, but it's also about learning. And so the story goes something like this. I was working in an organization. A new person came in who was the ranking executive. That person had thoughts about what the position was, but didn't really understand what the position was. So they came into it wearing the position, but not embodying the position, not willing to do the position. They just wanted to wear the title. And so my job was to prepare them to do the job, not wear the title. They became very frustrated with me because that isn't what they had imagined that the position was. They were going to wear it, not do it. And so the more I tried to help them, the more pushback I received. And then I got to a point where I wasn't sure how to keep going because I'm the doer, I'm the fixer. So I went to my circle of trust, my circle of friends within that institution, and got some great advice. And what I learned in the end is like what every plant mama knows, and I love to use this analogy, is that sometimes you repot the plant, you water it, you give it sunlight, you talk to it, you do everything, but you might not be the right gardener. And so it doesn't thrive. And that's okay to be able to admit that because a different gardener is needed. And in this case, while I was not the right person to really help that person, I had to admit that to myself that it was not necessarily a failure per se, but I was not the right gardener for that person. And so those are the kinds of stories we have. And hopefully that's like an aha moment for someone who has been in a similar situation or is in that situation now, to understand that you may not be able to meet that moment, but you've learned now that tinkering can't always solve things and that maybe there's another path forward for solving whatever that situation is.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing about your book and that specific story. I know there were definitely many moments across the contributors, right, the different authors, that I could see aspects of my own experience, especially ones relating to failure, since I find whenever stepping into any kind of leadership role, it always entails some level of risk. but it can be very complicated, right? Sometimes it's
Uh-huh.
about the politics of it, that really lend itself into like, oh, this is about people, right? Like, leadership. I mean, there's aspects of it that we can like understand. Oh, there's a strategy approach to it, right? Where maybe we can kind of think our way through it. But then I think in collaboration with others, having that circle of trust, learning from stories of past educators. I mean, I think it really entails so much reflection and thought and courage to lead successfully. And then sometimes being a good leader knows also when to like step down and to like remove yourself from it, or to change up, the mindset going forward. And so I know for myself, it really stirred up a lot of really important reflections. Sometimes it was very comforting. Sometimes it was triggering, but, all for the sake of, trying to, um, have that agency, right? I think, right, ultimately, of like reclaiming your own sense of power, that you will come out of this better, right?
Right.
Rather than what oftentimes people speak about as like if they step into leadership, like a school principal, and then they, oh, I'm never going to do that again, and then they're just completely checked out. I think understanding our motives as leaders, having support, all of that really is important. And so this book feels like not just a roadmap, but also it's like that one friend that can comfort you in a difficult moment, because it's backed up by so much experience. And of course, with that experience, the conviction in the words that are being put down. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And, in a way, you've already, beaten me to the next question and the last question that I was going to ask, which was a book recommendation. So definitely Trinity of Leadership would be the books that you would recommend.
Yeah, definitely right. And one other thing, Scott, too. I just want to say something very succinctly about leadership. It is a
Mm,
human business.
mm.
So, for anyone listening, never lose sight of the humanistic aspect of leadership. And that's what the book, and thank you so much for how you describe the book, like, something that can be comforting in a friend. And that's what we intended for. But also, it's a human business and there's a humanistic approach to it. And that means recognizing that you are the human in the process as well as the others around you. And so being with humans can be messy. And that's okay because it's also can be beautiful and wonderful and rewarding. And it's just keeping in mind that it's a human business. Mhm.
I 100% agree. I love that overarching theme of humanistic leadership,
Mhm.
centering the human component, that quality that we must bring in, that we must bring that in. We can't
Mhm.
expect that of others. And it really speaks to how we can build these healthy cultures within our workplaces, so that all people thrive, right, in that environment, through humanistic leadership. So Denise, this has been a really amazing conversation. I so enjoyed my time with you in Cambridge, in dialogue, through the book event, that you promoting your book Trinity of Leadership, and I so enjoyed this opportunity to connect with you further and learn more about your journey as an educator and all of these nuggets of wisdom that you have been sharing with all of us today. Wanted to say a big thank you to you and give you the last word. So any final thoughts as we're wrapping up this conversation?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on, and it has just been a joy to meet you. I know that this will not be the last time that we have a conversation. Um, I would just want to leave, sort of the listeners for this, sort of where I started, which is that our lives, how we lead, how we think is not etched in stone, that we always have the agency to tinker, to adapt, and to reshape it.